happy to present Michael, who will tell you a bit about the Cossacks and their activities after the revolution. And he'll talk about horses too, for those of you that are horse lovers.
Great.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much.
So, my name is Ivan Podvalov. We came in from Los Angeles along with Mike. I'll give you a little bit of an introduction who we are, because I know some people might know me, but not a lot of people know Michael.
Right.
So in Los Angeles a few years ago, we established a Russian Los Angeles Research Collective. It's a research organization which is researching the resources and the history of the community in the city of Los Angeles. And we try to dig in deep, and me and Mike kind of collaborated on this project together. Mike, we have a little museum too in the cathedral out there in Los Angeles, Holy Virgin Mary Russian Cathedral. And he is part of our research collective. He's a member of Congress of Russian Americans, as I am. So we're doing a little work on bringing the past to present. And Mike also kind of had a long journey discovering the roots of his father, because he didn't really know much about his father because he was a late child. By the time he grew up and had some interest, the father was gone, unfortunately. So we went through this journey together, and by the way, congratulating the museum with the 75th anniversary. Wow. So this is our little gift to the museum.
Great.
Also, we put in some other gifts, but I will give it to Mike, and we're going to run this presentation together, so I'll step in a few times here and there, and here's Mike Protzenko.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I know Ivan told me to come up and thank you for the museum for inviting me up here. I think it's a pleasure. I've never been to this museum. But I'm going to look around later, and what I see is just amazing that we have all these collections, and unfortunately in the United States, because of the Cold War, because of everything else, all of this stuff was kind of put away to the side. We have another situation, that is what it is. I'm going to talk about Russia from many years ago, and Cossacks and stuff in general. So let me get started here. As you see, my name is Mike S. Protzenko. My father was Sergei Protzenko. We'll talk about him. He's a Kuban Cossack. I grew up in Laurel Canyon, Hollywood Hills. I have a brother that's 2 years old. His name is Sergei S. Protzenko. We both went to Hollywood High. I took a journey. I worked for the printing industry, a company called Heidelberg, for many years. It's a printing press manufacturer, and which I'm kind of retired from. And my brother was in the United States Marine Corps, and after he was discharged from the Marine Corps, he finished his college and then went to work for the IRS. Right now he lives in Springfield, Virginia. Kind of quickly, my mother, her name was Laura Bench. She's an American-born from Des Moines, Iowa, and she came to California, World War II, to work at Douglas Aircraft Factory, which a lot of people during that time did. So that's how she's in California, and we're going to talk about my dad, about how he got it here. Anyway, if we look at the picture on the left, the tall gentleman standing there, it was taken in 1925 at Buffalo Stadium, and it was by, they were part of a group called General Shkuro. I don't know if anybody's heard of him. Famous Cossack general, and he formed a troop in Paris. He did. And actually, my father got involved with him. I'm sorry if I get out of here. My father got involved because he was in a part of a troop in Bulgaria, because he went from Turkey, Constantinople to Bulgaria. There were other Cossacks there, and they formed a troop. He didn't form, but he became part of a troop. Then General Shkuro sent them a communication, and I'll tell you how I know that it did, to join them to be part of the corps of their Jighits, which is a trick riders. So we're looking here at a picture, 1925, they're part of the troop. On the left, this big, tall gentleman on the end, his name is General Savitsky. And he came to Los Angeles, actually worked in the Hollywood movie industry. And I'll tell how he came here. General Maloshenko, he continued to stay in Paris. He's Kuban Cossack. And my father, of course, is standing to the right. Kind of looking over here, here's a picture of my dad, taken sometime in the 60s. He has his Cherkeska on. And if you look, he's wearing red pants. Now, in a military uniform, you'd never wear red pants. Those are for performances. People were performing. It kind of looked good to wear red pants and stuff like that. And kind of updated, too, is people, when they think of Cossacks, they think they all dressed like this. But it's the only Kuban Terek, which were Caucasian Cossacks, and tribes, the Dagestanis, the Chechens, you know, the Abkhazians, and everybody else would dress like that. And this was their clothing that they wore as a dress clothing and as a uniform. The Tsar of Russia gave them permission to wear the Cherkeskas as a military uniform. Okay? And I have a couple of items here that if we can look up later. I've got 2 hats, Cossack hats. These were made for me in the East Coast by the Cossack Museum. We have a short one and we have a tall one. And generally, if you'll see a picture with them wearing these tall ones, unless it's new, that is pre-Civil War. That will show that the photograph was taken before the Civil War. After the Civil War, you can see they're wearing, you know, shorter hats and stuff like that. So that's kind of a different. And then we have some kinjals here. This one is a silver kinjal. It's made out of what they call German silver, very not high quality silver. And most of these are made in Georgia, Dagestan, you know, in the mountain region. And the one here, which is a nice one, this is stamped, you can look at it later, KKV, which stands Kubansky Kazaki Voiskia. And they also had Terek ones. So these are stamped for the military to carry. I don't know, you buy them or whatever else. And then we have a couple of belts here. I see over there you do, of Caucasian belts. Hang on a second. And you'll see that they have a belt with silver on it, and they have items hanging down. And it's kind of the Islamics put it together. So there's something to what these pieces mean. Unfortunately, I can't tell you about that. But these are Cossack belts / Georgians. Anybody from the Caucasus regions would be wearing those. Let's move on. So here we talk about a population in general. 2,928,000, 2%, 3% of populations in Russia, 97. And here's kind of the breakdown of the Don is always the largest amount of Cossacks. Then comes the Kuban, then Terek, and it goes Astrakhan, Ural, Orenburg, Siberian, Transbaikal, Semner, Semizhits, Semner, Amur, Izuzi. So all these are different Cossacks that are started at different times. But the main thing what I want to say about is the Kuban Cossacks is a lot of them were descended from the Zaporozhian Cossacks. So most Kuban Cossacks, a lot of them have Ukrainian name, like my last name, Ianko, Protzenko, Naumenko. And in fact, in the South Russian, the Kuban area, they didn't speak Russian, they spoke a Ukrainian dialect called Balachka, and they're the only Cossacks that spoke a dialect of any kind. The rest of them spoke Russian, from my understanding. In the Don Cossacks, there were Kalmyks that were Don Cossacks, and they were Kalmyks, which were leftover Genghis Khan, and then the Cossacks of Terek and stuff, there were some Muslims and stuff like that.
I want to add that when we were in Los Angeles making the presentation, Michael already done presentation in LA, so there were a couple Cossacks who showed up, and I never knew they're Jewish descent. So there were tribes in the mountains of Dagestan, or you name it. So they, and he runs a Cossack martial arts school in the city of Florence. And he goes, I'm descended of Jewish tribes out of mountains. And
Exactly.
he's a Cossack wearing papacha and, all of...
Yep.
And teaches classes how to use shashka and all that stuff.
Absolutely. It's pretty amazing.
So
I don't know the gentleman that well. First time I met him there at the museum, but I've seen him on, he has YouTube videos, and I've been, work with him on Facebook and stuff like that. Photographed there is Tsar Nicholas and his son, Alexei, and he is reviewing his Cossack convoy, his guards. So, Civil War. We say Civil War lasted in Russia 1918-1922. And the Ottomans and the Don forms independent states. The Don and Kuban both won their organization. Majority of the volunteer white Russians were recruited from Cossacks. There were Cossacks that fought in the Red Army. I would say most of the officers were in the White Army. I can't guarantee that. So they settled in Bulgaria, Kingdom of Serbia, Slovenia, and the ones who were left were persecuted and had to work very hard. What I want to add to this is the Cossacks of the Southern Vojska, which is the Don, Kuban, and Terek. Most of them fought till 1920, and they ended up down in the Crimea. And General Wrangel evacuated the Army of the South from November 13th to November 16th. And there's 143,693. This is a number that's been battered around. Half of them are civilians, half of them are soldiers. And some of them ended up on an island in the Aegean Sea. The Kuban Cossacks ended up in Lemnos. I talked to Ivan, and we talked about Zharov ended up in Lemnos. Now, he's a Don Cossack, but there were other Cossacks there in Lemnos, which is a horrid island that had no water. They had to bring water in. There was no food. It became really a bad situation. And some of them were stationed in the mainland of Turkey. We spoke to
Gallipoli.
What?
Gallipoli.
No, that's the army. Chaka. There's other islands that they were supported in there, but these are the main groups of the Cossacks. Photograph here is taken in Paris again. Gentleman way to the left, his name is Gamali. Vasily Gamali. Gentleman next to him is Sava Panasenko, and my father. Sava Panasenko is the gentleman who formed the troop in Bulgaria and brought my dad and 5 other Cossacks. Okay. Down below we have some Cossacks. This is during the Civil War. We can tell. The first is Alexander Lekatorsky, I think is the best way to pronounce it. He was in the convoy. And then we have Lektorsky, right?
He ended up here in San Francisco.
You did? Okay, yes. I know it was in the convoy. Nikolai Babiv, which is the general standing next to him. And if you look at Babiv, you see these stripes there? That is how many times he's been wounded. This is the way they designated their wounds. Multiple times. Fortunately, he didn't make it through the Civil War, and that's his father standing next to him. And both of them were what they call Kuban Ice March veterans. So I don't know about his dad's, but I know he didn't make it through the Civil War, unfortunately. Okay, Cossacks, when they left, did not have a good life, most of them. My father, lucky that he was a equestrian, went to cavalry school, learned how to do the Jigitovka. There was entertainment needed, and there were troops, many of them, formed all over Europe. Shkuro's troop seems to be one of the biggest that brought together a lot of people, a lot of well-known people. But if you didn't have that skill, you would have to do stuff. Well, they built roads and tunnels and just worked very, very hard just to make a living. And here you can see some photographs of these gentlemen working. Of course, there's no power tools or anything else. They just have to do everything by hand. And some of them joined the French Foreign Legion or some other armies to get going from there on their life. Okay, So we're talking again about Cossack troops that were performers, dancers, cabarets, shows with knives, which are kinjals, songs, dancing, restaurants, Jighitsovka, trekking riding shows, parts of circuses, choirs, and some came to Hollywood, which included my father, to work on movies. To add to this, there were, and I'll get later on about Savitsky, the 101 Ranch, which was another traveling show that didn't have just Cossacks, it had Indians, it had just all kinds of people in there. So kind of look up here. We've got one here. It says, the Cossacks are coming. This gentleman's name is Stephen Salim, and kind of interesting how I found him, but I don't get into it. He came to the United States with my father's troop, and my father had a partner. His name was Alexander Melikhoff. And he came in, and they brought a troop of about 115 people. And as they went, a lot of them didn't even make it to Hollywood. Some of them made it to Midwest, some of them broke away, some of them, did whatever. So I don't ever know of him coming to Hollywood, but of course here he is. He has his troop, S. Saline Troop, Imperial Russian Cossack Troop. Oh, I went the wrong way. Imperial Russian Cossack Troop. So he had a small troop and performed. Photograph over there, that's my father on the left, and they're dancing, and you don't see their feet, of course. They're dancing at a cabaret. And this is his friend Sapilniak. They did this, I think, before the show started. They came to Paris before the troupe had been completely formed. And they danced at cabarets, and I've got some bills of different cabarets they were dancing in. This gentleman over here, he came to the United States. I forgot his name. He's part of the Melikhoff Protzenko troupe, and of course he's performing with kinjals and dancing and throwing them and everything else. They would put one up on their lip. They had a piece of rope, and they would spit out kinjals on the ground. They would keep pulling another one up, and then they would tack it down on the ground. So him, I don't have that much information on him. It's we don't know where he went. As I say, a lot of them did not, make it to Hollywood, unfortunately. So let's talk a little bit about people. And Yvonne reminded me. There were some gentlemen that did make it to Hollywood, but they actually went down to Mexico to do shows. They felt that they could make some more money doing that. They got horses together, they performed some shows. Some came back. I think some just stayed down there. There's a name by the name of Sakno, and there were two Saknos in the troupe. One worked in Hollywood, the other one just went down to Mexico, and then he had a family. I think he has a great nephew. His name is Sergio Sakno. I haven't talked to him. The other Saknos, he has his son is a Marine lieutenant colonel that lives in Arizona somewhere, and his daughter lives in Ohio or something else like that. And I think we talked a little bit about that. He's, I think his name's George Sakno. Anyway, he is in he's had some organization, right?
American Veterans
Veteran organization. He's way up there on that. So it helps out on that stuff. So when we talk about trekking riding, we're talking about the word Jighitsovka, which we'll show some pictures of this. And people always, not people, but I've heard they would think the Cossacks would go get a horse, go out to the field, and practice and play around. I assumed somebody had, but you can't really learn to be a professional without doing it. So most of them learned it in their cavalry school. My father went to cavalry school, and they taught the Cossacks how to do this. And in fact, in Russia, the Kremlin Equestrian Riding School, they still teach the Jighitsovka there. And I've seen videos of them. And a lot of the stuff is not just for performance, but it is a part of a military display. To pick up, you've dropped a sword or something on the ground, pick it up, a sword. They did the pyramid, and you'll see it later. They would stack it up, and it's like, well, it looks great for performance, but If you're on a flat land and you've stacked 3 people high and you're moving along slowly, you can see way, way in the distance. So all these moves they do have a basis on the military, moves of what they were taught. Here we got, we're talking about the Cossacks created troops around the world, and we're talking about Zharov and Platov, the performer groups, independent riding shows, throwing knives, singing songs, films, and Western and historical films also. They joined French Legion. Do you want to add to that at all, Ivan, about the verbiage in here?
Well, the 2 most famous choirs which were put together, they were Platov choir and the Don Cossack choir, right? So, for example, the Don Cossack choir came into Los Angeles, and again, we were focusing on Los Angeles. So the Don Cossack choir came into Los Angeles in 1936, and they performed at UCLA. That was their first recorded performance. And then the Platovs, somehow, it's going to be 80 years since Rachmaninoff passing, right? And he was a parishioner of a church in Los Angeles, and somehow, when he passed away in 1943, 80 years ago, the Platov choir was in town in Los Angeles, and they performed at Rachmaninoff's funerals.
Right.
Every time the choir, the Don Cossacks, the Platov Cossacks come to a town, that they would perform with the church choir. They do the liturgy, and that's what you were singing prior, right here, while you were sitting gathering.
Right.
So yeah, they've been touring United States as a choir. So that's the only thing I can add. A lot of Cossacks ended up going to serve at actually French Legion. Yep. And we have multiple stories of the Cossacks who ended up going serving in the China during the World War II.
Most of World War II.
Further down the line in Africa and so on and so on.
Absolutely.
So they continue serving in the army.
Correct. So we have a gentleman here on the left. He's on the side. His name is Trente Globa. This photograph was taken in 1936. My father formed another small troop of 5 Cossacks, includes himself, to go down to Australia and perform. And he ended up in Ohio somewhere. And I did communicate with him. He's passed away. I mean, he was 95, 100 and something before I had talked to him. But he's performing there, and there's multiple pictures of him performing, them performing in Australia. Top over there at the right, that's Ivan Sapilniak. That's one of his dance partners there. He also was here in L.A. I don't know if he made to L.A. I know he made to New York, because I have never seen his name in L.A. But he was the same person dancing with my father. And he also went back to England and joined a troupe in England, found out through the internet and stuff. He had a troupe in England and passed away, and he was buried in England. So he never stayed here in the United States. Down there, we've got the original Don Cossacks of Zharov, brochure or whatever that they put together for a show. And over here, we're talking about the pyramid that they performed. So there's the pyramid. Back. Let's go forward. All right. Here's the pyramid. My father's at the top. And you can see they stack them across, tie up, and then they do it for a performance. This was done in...
Your father was at the top?
Yeah, my father's at the top. This is done in Dublin, Ireland, in 1925. All the shows were in 1925 in Europe. Touched the wrong thing.
Yeah, that's fine.
They Dublin, Ireland. They were in. They went to the British Isles and they did France. They did performances in France. And we'll talk about when they came back from France. So here we go. Don Don Cossack Choir at UCLA, and there's a program, and then at the right, here's Zharov with Rachmaninoff, I guess in Germany in 1927. So they knew each other pretty well, I guess, and collaborated on some other items and stuff like that. So we're talking about mostly my father's Cossacks in New York, and we'll kind of go around the picture. It's different sequence, and I'm going to start over there. This photograph over here was taken in Philadelphia at the 150th anniversary of the United States. That was 1926. It's called the Sexcentennial. I don't know. I forgot the name of it. Anyway, so they had a show there, and here is a picture of my father. You don't see General Pershing there, who was one of the top generals of the United States that was a cavalry officer. He was the head of the U.S. Expeditionary Force in the United States Army during World War I. And he went to one of his performances and came down and looking for my dad and said, you know, thank you. He said, great performance. With him is a Marine major, his name is Biddle, which is a pretty famous Marine. And they had some kind of Marine barracks there, and they came there and they were congratulating him. And he said it was kind of an off thing. They said, you know, he was talking to them and said, oh, let's take a picture. And so they snapped this picture. And Father's very proud of that, you know. You get a picture of the American general Marines. You can see he's a lot shorter than these gentlemen. So, picture up here, pretty interesting. There's Ivan Sapilniak again. He's standing there. We're on the edge of a building. Hard to read, but it says Madison Square Garden. That's one place that they performed at. There was multiple pictures. His partner is standing right there, Alexander Melikhoff. He was a Don Cossack. I don't know whatever happened to him. I can't find out. I know he didn't make it to Hollywood. There was a lot of financial issues going on with this whole show, so who knows. What I want to concentrate on is this gentleman right here. His name is Gabriel Saladuchin. He went to Hollywood, and he was with another guy. He wrote a book in 1962. It's called Life. Try to get it up there. It's called, I would say, The Life and Fate of a Cossack. And in this book is where a lot of the information that I have coming, because he was in the Civil War. He ended up in Finland, but he was part of General Shkuro's troops. So he wrote a lot about what happened with the troop. Fathers mentioned how they formed troops, how we came to the United States, and everything else. And he came to the United States. He actually went to Hollywood. He was in the movie industry. Eventually, he moved to Florida. I think he did before then. He had a show going on somewhere. His wife was part of it. If you look in the book, his wife is. There's another book that was written, is Trick Writing of Cossacks Around the World. And this book is a fairly new book. What it is a culmination of Saladuchin's book and Eliseev's. So I haven't read through it, but what I can see is it's two books kind of crammed together. The same information, but there's more information in there. Photograph over here is them in Central Park. They had a lot of movie shoots because their movie was coming out and they wanted to promote it. Cossacks are here, Cossacks are there. And so they wanted to promote them in the movies, and so there's a lot of good still pictures. The nice part about these photographs, they were taken with a 11 by 12 camera, meaning the negative is as big as this piece of picture. So they don't have it like a 35 millimeter expand. This is, so you go from this, and you're going to have a really clear picture. You can enlarge them and everything else. They're crystal clear still after many, many years. They're great shots. Here is part of the troop. There's Melikhoff, standing there, that's my father. They had women performers in this troupe. They had a band in this troupe. They had dancers. So it wasn't just riding, it was a traveling show. This little guy here, his name is Yuri Klus. He came to Los Angeles. I'll show you his father later. That's his mother over there. And some of them came to LA, some of them didn't. Okay, so now we're going to talk about my father. It's a picture of him taken in Paris in 1924. Born in he's born in 1894 in the Kuban region in Stanica Biskobnaya. Biskobnaya is on the Urap River below Armavir. So it's 20-30 miles south of Armavir. Attended Nicholas Cavalry School. That is the badge. If you see anybody wearing it, that means that they attended that school. In the United States, they don't do that, but they wear their badge of what school that they graduated from. Civil War, joined the White Army. After the beginning of the Civil War, joined the White Army in 1918. And he was in what they call the Ice March, the first Kuban campaign. And it was probably one of the biggest offenses that the White Army, it lasted for, from, let's see, it lasted months, I think from February to May, you know what I mean? So it was a big long thing. It was in the middle of winter and stuff like that. So I'm kind of reminiscing. Moved from Constantinople to Bulgaria, joined a troop of 6 Cossacks, that's what it is. Relocated to Paris, 1924, became part of General Shkuro's troop. 1925-26, he built a member of 115 troops with Melikhoff, and they came to the United States. Now, at that same time, and we talked about the first general, his name is General Savitsky. He set a troop up also, pulling from the members of the General Shkuro's troops, because it had basically disbanded, they were done. And he had a partner named Prince Andronikov, Archie Andronikov. They formed another troop of about, say, 115 people, and they joined the 101 Ranch Wild West show. I guess back then there were Buffalo Bills. Everybody seemed to have these shows, and you know, people didn't have. They would go to town like a circus. They would put this big show and have a big show, extravaganza on, and so they would travel around there. So this Savitsky, he came there at the same time. They joined. They built their troops about the same time. My understanding from the books, the Protzenko Melikhoff offered more money than the other troop. I don't know what the dollar amount was. So they were able to put their troop together a little bit sooner. Sorry about that. So General Savitsky, besides being a member of the Convoy, which is the Tsar's Guard, and he was a very political man. He was part of the political government in the Kuban and stuff like that. He came back to Hollywood, and he became an extra in the movies. And I looked through it up. He did 53 films in TV and movies, and he used the name Sam Savitsky. So if you look up Sam Savitsky, I don't know you will, he's the guy who did the acting. So he spent a lot of time making some money acting. I heard also he was a maitre d' in a French restaurant, and I have no idea. He is buried in the same cemetery as my father is, Hollywood Forever. And we'll get into a little bit more people buried in that cemetery. Here's the Protzenko family, my father's. my father there. This was taken 1911. He's 16 years old. I think his brother's name is Nicky. I don't know what his other brother's name is. His brother's going to an agronomy school, which sounds strange to me wearing a uniform, but I guess back then they would. If you notice how tall the hats are, as I said, pre-Civil War. These are always a pre-Civil War picture, you know, unless you do it nowadays. That's his sister on the end. That's his uncle. Don't know his name. That's his father. That's his niece. I'm sorry, that's his niece. His mother. His brother's child here. His wife and their baby and his other sister. So this is a shot of them. You can see they're not in the military. They're wearing their Cherkesskas. They've got their kinjals. They're wearing all their belts and everything else. His brother, we know he's in the military because he has shoulder patches on. He's actually in the Cossack army at that point. My understanding, both of them were killed. Sisters got sent to Siberia. You know, the story is always this horrendous story that everybody loses everything they have and doesn't end up well. He's the only one that came to the United States of all of his family. He was able to later track down, I think, his sister or some niece or something, and I'm still working on that. Hollywood movie industry. There's several movies that we're talking about Cossacks and stuff. Here's a list of them. We're talking later on Talis Bulba, and these are Western Rhythm on the Range, Destry Rides, and these are different movies, and there's quite a few other ones, but there's just kind of a list of them. Actually, this picture here is taken with an Indian, and this gentleman is actually a Georgian, not a Cossack. This was way before. He was part of Buffalo Bill's troop that he brought in. They said Cossacks, but they actually were Georgian riders. Dressed the same, knew the same moves and everything else. Don't know his name. Picture here, very important picture. Here they're doing a pyramid, a small pyramid. If you look in the background, this is the church on the set they built. I heard they built it up in Hollywood Hills somewhere. But the same gentleman that designed this church for the movie is the same gentleman that designed the church on Michael Turner, Holy Virgin Mary Cathedral. If you look on the fronts, they're very similar on both of them.
Yeah, so the set designer, he worked in Hollywood. His name is Talubeyev. That's a Russian name, Alexander Talubeyev. But in America, he became Tolubov. So he was a famous set designer in Hollywood, lasted for 20, 30 years. And he worked on that movie. And they say that, again, history has it that the cathedral, which is Michel Tarina Cathedral, was built based on the set. There's some similarity, but we don't really like. The front looks a little bit like a cathedral, but not exactly.
Yeah, but it's something. At least it doesn't look completely different. That's what I've heard. Okay. Here's a group. Here's a gentleman right there. His name is Tim McCoy. Again, he has a rough riding show, and you can see there's Indians, Cossacks in it, cowgirls, cowboys, endless who they are. And he worked in the movie studios at the same time my father did, and Cossacks that came with my dad worked with him quite a bit. And you know, he became very good friends. He was actually he's a captain in the military, and he knew how to ride horses and everything else. So he became pretty good friends with them, and it's documented in this book. And Tim McCoy came to our house once. Dad says he's coming by, so he came by. He had two sons. He had younger sons, and he came by. I remember at Easter time or something like that, and came by. So they knew each other very well and talked to one another. This picture here is taken at a bunch of Cossacks. Father's here, right here. This guy's name is Steklietsky, Jack Steklietsky. who lived in L.A. He died, I don't know where he was buried. And here's another guy, I've lost, I'll remember his name after I'm done. Anyway, I don't know where they're doing, but this photograph, they have a title underneath saying that the Cossacks are donating, taking money and donating to build Holy Virgin Cathedral, to put their money together to help them.
So yeah, so the cathedral this year celebrates a centennial. So this is the oldest cathedral in Los Angeles in Southern California. And the Cossacks, right, when they came in, they started having some income. They produced some income, and they did definitely participated in the establishment of the cathedral. Donated money with active part as the parishioners and trying to, you know, build the cathedral literally brick by brick.
Absolutely, thank you.
And before we move on, so we have this poster, right, Mike?
Right, absolutely, you can show it.
This one I can show you. So this is a little later. This is not the movie, the Cossack movie. This is not the first Cossack
movie.
But this is 1960s, again, another project related to the Cossacks. This is done by Turzhansky, another Russian who ended up in Hollywood. And they had to repeat what your father did in 1920.
Yeah.
20s.
Absolutely. Anyway, so we'll go on. It gets kind of interesting. So, when the movie Cossacks were made, besides the riders, part of the Cossack troop of this 115 were not all Cossacks. There were Georgians, there were Ukrainians, there were Russians. The only ones that were real Cossacks, as far as I know, were the riders, you know. The rest of them were musicians and dancers and everything else. So we don't know that, but we definitely know all the riders were Cossacks. So they worked on the movie of the Cossacks, and actually they worked on another movie beforehand, as far as I know, before the movie was filmed. And an interesting story about this is this. Their last performance was in St. Louis, and they had was their last engagement before they come to Hollywood. And my father went to Los Angeles, by train, and he gets there, and they said, "Wait a minute, this movie's going to be on hold for a year." So he goes, "Okay." So he sends him a telegram, which I think that's about the only way you can get something back then, telling him, "Stay put wherever you're at, don't move, or do whatever, but I will get a hold of you when the filming starts." Well, I think it was like 13 of the Cossacks, or 16, ended up buying 3 cars, and they drove all the way to Los Angeles. And it took them, because at that time there's no highway, there's no what they call Route 66 or anything else. These are dirt roads. In 1926, there were not a lot of roads and stuff. So I don't know where they must have learned how to drive on their own, and they made it to Los Angeles. It took them 3.5 weeks to get to Los Angeles, because, you know, we're talking old 20 cars, we're talking dirt roads. I assume they slept some places. I have no idea, but they made it to Los Angeles. And one of the gentlemen, again, is this Gabriel Saladuchan, which I've talked about. So yeah, that was kind of interesting that you think, why does it take so long? Well, I guess you drive dirt roads, it's going to take you a while. And how you find it, they didn't have maps or stuff. I assume you just asked along the way, which way is Los Angeles? And they think they get Portland. So it's not like a small city. I think they kind of figured that one out. But you know, this is where it goes back to the inventive people. They don't give up. They didn't just come in here and say, you know, unfortunately, please feed me, take care of me. They figured a way to make something work. They will take lots of different jobs. It happened in Europe. It happened in Constantinople. Princes and you know, counts were out there driving taxis, working at a lot of different places and everything else just to make a living. It didn't matter how much education you had. Most everybody was broke, you know, at that time. And so everybody did what they have, and they were raised to do that. I mean, doesn't matter what your status level is, you're going to have to work and figure it out. There's nobody going to take care of you at this point. So we got some more pictures of us, and this is kind of interesting. This picture up here is taken, it was taken in a movie called California. And it's done, how do I know it's a movie? It's a lot of research where you go look through books, and you go to the Herrick Library in LA, and you start finding pictures of what they are and what it is. It says, here's my father, and here's this guy, what's his name? We talked about him. You know, his daughter's in the picture at the museum that has a sign Russian.
This one is the Osset.
We'll pull it out of our head. Okay.
Torchinov.
Torchin. There you go. Oh, that's Torchin. There. And an interesting story is he was the second commander of Simonov.
Yeah, he was an adjutant to Ataman.
Simonov.
Siberian Ataman.
Yeah. So here he is on the set. He came to California different, way and stuff like that. We look over here, and here's Yuri Klus sitting right there, a little bit older. This is his father, George, and back here is Solodukhin. So he spent time in a lot of different movies and stuff. And like I say, they're playing extras. They're playing riders. So here we got another movie called Wyoming, and they're riding like Indians. Okay? And here they are sitting on the set. Now here's my father sitting right here. He has a mustache. Other guys do. Here's Dorchin over there. Let's see, Solodukhin is right there. And people don't realize a lot of Hollywood movies, the Indians, these Cossacks came in. The Cossacks are the ones who basically knew how to trick ride and do a lot of the riding, stunts, jumping on horses and everything else to produce a movie. So it's not just Indians. They may look like Indians from a distance, but they're not Indians. And there probably are some that perform. I don't know, but we're talking the early times. You're talking in the 20s, and so it's you figure it out on that one. A little more about my father. He worked as an upholsterer. What happened was he only could do trick riding so long. So he eventually learned how to upholster through a friend of his called Pyachnikov. And he ended up working in the studios again. He became a member of Local 44, which is the craftsman union. And he worked there until he retired. We're talking again, he took a troupe to Australia. And we look at here's a picture of them. It's my father. And we'll look at a picture later. There's some of them afterwards. Glaskov, forgot, and then I'll catch it in the head. Trying to figure it all out. Anyway, Shtikletsky. I'm sorry, that's Shtikletsky. He was a member of the first Kuban campaign. And here's something, Ivan got me this, I printed it out, his signature is up there. These are the members. As far as I know, there was only one organization that was in Hollywood area. There were none on the East Coast or anything else. If you were, they would print out a program and monthly and talk about it, but the members are only in LA, and I think it started in Yugoslavia or something else where they started the thing, and then the guys moved to US. And they have that. Over here, I kind of put a picture together. There's a group of them. We put the Ice March medal. That's what with the crown of thorns, which I wear here. And then there's a Gallipoli pin, or similar to that, the 1920-21, which all these people were evacuated from Crimea. Where Skvortsov is where? Right here. Let's see. Skvortsov.
He's in the middle.
He's this end?
Yeah.
Okay, that's General Skvortsov. And he was part of the convoy there, and also a nice march veteran. He was a Cossack. Went to the same cavalry school as my father. Here's us, taken in Hollywood, 1960s. I'm on the left, my brother's on the right. And you can tell, you know, he was not that young of a man anymore. But, you know, he did what he had to do on that. His hands were like double of mine. I was always surprised, you know. I don't know if it's from riding or he just was born that way. I mean, his hands were just massive. Yeah, literally massive hands. Interesting here, I always look at this and I know exactly, I told my brother about it. He's wearing this thing. We went to a place called POP, Pacific Ocean Park, which is long debunked. And Warner Brothers Studios, he was working at that time, had some like park, we took over part of the park. So I know we went there, and that's the only reason how I know, you know, remember things and happening. Okay, here's the pictures of the my father on the left, Glaskov and Steklietsky. This is in the 50s. These guys were the ones on the horse, and they went to Australia. And they still look like they're in halfway decent shape, you know. And, you know, I know Steklietsky, I met him, and unfortunately he became an alcoholic, but he had a cane, so he must have really screwed his legs up, and I don't know how you can't doing this stuff, or who knows. Photograph here, taken at the studios. You can see me just looking at that. I guess a friend of his at the studio says, hey, take a picture. And then after all those years, you become pretty much a nondescript person that just is one of many, that a lot of the Russians, no matter how high they are, they kind of blend into the crowd and you know, live their life in the United States. This is a great photograph of here. This is the last photograph taken of the Tsar of Russia with his staff members. It's taken in 1916. Civil War is going on, and you can see out front there's
World War I is going on.
the World War is going on. 1960, the Tsar, his Tsar's son. These are his 4 daughters. I think this is Anastasia. I don't know. And here's his 4 daughters. And here's part of it. This picture actually is a little bigger. But there are people in here that we know of. Gentleman here, his name is Skvortsov. He's the guy who was in part of the Ice March. That's General Skvortsov.
He ended up in Los Angeles.
Yep. He's buried in L.A. also in Hollywood forever. Garave, I think, ended up in Massachusetts. I got a book and try to get a little more on that, but he ended up in the United States, in Massachusetts. This gentleman here, his name is Lavrov, Sergei Lavrov. Through a fluke, I found out that he ended up in Jordan, the country of Jordan.
So the Cossacks went into Jordan because there's a Jordanian king. It was a custom, right? So the Cossacks used to guard Persian king or whatever Shah, and then the Jordanian royal family. You know, they were personal. They become personal guards of the Jordanian royal family.
Circassian personal guards. So I don't know. He may have known some of them or whatever. And then this last gentleman is Galushkin, right? Galushkin. L.A. buried in Los Angeles, Hollywood Forever Cemetery. So it's a great shot. It shows things, and it shows people that are not completely unknown, even to us, you know, here.
So those are members of the convoy, and there were 400 of them, and they were on rotation. There were 200 in service at a time, kind of guarding the Tsar, the residences, any train, whatever he traveled. So whenever he traveled, and there were 200 of them which were off. Like kind of
so the rotation. I think what I hear is this is his staff, so it's more than just the convoy. These are his staff.
This is the convoy members. That's not the staff.
It's not part of the staff. Okay, got it. So we're going to talk more about convoy here. There are total. Mr. Yvonne looks through the cemetery. A couple of cemeteries we have is the Hollywood Forever and the Serbian Cemetery. I think you found some there. We have 14 members of the convoy buried in Los Angeles. at this time. I mean, we could have more, but it is hard to say if there are any more. There probably are not. So we got up here is Major General Stefan Petin.
So I will take a little.
Sure.
In regards of Petin, right? So the family ended up in China. His daughter became a very famous opera singer. So she performed Ira Petina. So she performed across the United States in all the famous opera houses, Metropolitan Opera, and so on and so on. So he sent her from China. He sent her out to United States to study, and then I looked him up in Russia. I was looking to scoop up some information, what they know about him in Russia, and the researcher who was kind of researching, he wrote a book about Convoy, and the history of his was unknown in Russia. So they saw that he passed away in Harbin, and that was it. But he made it out of China in 1940 something, and he ended up being buried in Los Angeles at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, which in Russia they did not know. So I kind of got hold of the scientist out there and let him know the update. The guy on the right, the Georgian Veretinsky, which is a member of the Georgian royal family. So also very interesting history. We ended up his gravesite at the Serbian cemetery in Los Angeles, and a few years later I got a phone call from a gentleman with a very heavy British accent, and he goes, we were looking for years trying to find out what happened to him, because apparently he left London, England in the early 20s, and he was all excited about Hollywood, came to Hollywood to work in the film industry, and his whereabouts got lost all of a sudden. So I don't know, he got sick or whatnot, he died in Hollywood. And the family, he's got two daughters in London who were married into high royal nobility, British nobility, and one of his grandsons is ambassador to I don't know, like all that stuff. So they called me up and they're like, where is the gravesite? So just a small picture somewhere online helped them out to find where their grandfather was buried.
Excellent.
Ivan, what was his name again?
The Prince George Meretinsky.
Thank you.
All right. Down on the lower left, there is General Savitsky, and there's a Tsar walking by. He's standing with part of the convoy. He's out front. And this is Galushkin. And he's buried there at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. There is a Protzenko, that's a typo. There is a Vasily Protzenko, which I told Ivan, I don't know who he is. Somebody, I don't know if they are related or not. It's hard to say, you know that. Okay. Zahar Martine of Los Angeles. Here he is. He left lots of collections. And he published a Soglasia magazine in Los Angeles. Ivan knows more about him, if you can input about him. I really don't know, because this is a collaboration between both of us.
Yeah, so there's a small, this is the material from booklet. I don't know who published this booklet, but we have it in our archive. So picture says that this is his family, all of them were killed during the Civil War. After Civil War, he's the only one who made it alive. He was very active in Los Angeles. He was one of the dancers. I don't know where he danced, but probably he danced somewhere at the cabaret or restaurants in LA.
Somewhere. Yeah.
He also published a lot of recollections of his serving in an escort of the Tsar in Soglasia magazine. So there's a lot of him which he wrote. And also, he collected materials. He literally went and buying stuff which was related to the imperial family from auctions in New York, saying that he didn't want pieces ended up in, foreign hands. And I don't know what happened to his collection, actually. The whereabouts of that collection is unknown to us. So,
I guess, and then this is his family in Russia. I guess His Imperial Majesty's own convoy in Los Angeles the pictures of the celebrating service commemorating feast day of His Majesty's Convoy, Los Angeles, His Great Archbishop Anthony of Los Angeles officiating. I don't know what year this is. Got to be in the 50s.
60s.
60s.
Early 60s.
Okay. Do you want to go over these?
So yeah, I can speak up a little bit.
Yeah,
so,
do you want to have the microphone?
No, you're fine.
Okay.
No, Ivan. Microphone, please.
Microphone, please.
Microphone.
There you go.
So,
There you go. Good job.
Maria Sakovic, right there. So the Agoyev family, so the Agoyev last name popped up in your grandfather's diaries when he was visiting Los Angeles. It's when you were reading me his diaries. So the Agoyev is actually one of the founders of the stanitsa, and we found where it was established, where he was residing, and how it was listed, and it was listed as a Russian Cossacks Veteran Society. And based on the last name, I think he is Ossetian. So Agoyev doesn't sound very Russian to me. So those are early roots. So the majority of the Cossacks actually came into Los Angeles after World War II. So at that time they established the stanitsa in Glendora. It's the suburbs of Los Angeles right now, probably like 1 hour away. And there were massive citrus plantations out there. So Professor Ulitin, who is himself a Don Cossack, he brought in a group of Cossacks from Europe and settled them there. And they had the Kurinya, and there was like truly a Russian Cossack village at that time. Now you go to Glendora, Glendora looks like, you know, it's been what, 20, 30 years, nothing reminds it. The picture on the bottom is taken in Glendora. So, and the uniform, you see the gentleman, the Chavia gentleman on the right, his uniforms are actually, it's Mr. Melikhoff, his uniform is stained in right over there. So the uniform was preserved. We know the history of that uniform, and here's a guy in Glendora, uniforms behind there. So, Cossacks in early 50s purchased a house, which is nowadays demolished. It was a small house in Los Angeles, up on the hill, not too far away from Michel Tarena Church. And they established the Cossack stanitsa in Los Angeles in 1952, I would say. The address is there. The two pictures on the right, this is a kind of the inauguration of the Cossack house. It was, the history of the house is obviously, it was sold in late 80s, and there's a documentary if anybody wants to see it. General Skvortsov's son, before it was demolished, before it was sold, General Skvortsov's son, Michael Skvortsov, who was a cadet, I don't know, Misha, you probably knew him, right? So he's done an amazing movie. They filmed basically everything what was on the walls and put the history of the house together. But the pictures out there, you see, that's how the Cossacks look like. One on the right and one on the left. There are two brothers, the Don Cossacks, brothers Yermilovs. And one on the left, wearing a white suit, is Dr. Ribo. He's an Orenburg Cossack who came into Los Angeles in early 20s, and he was a doctor. He was a doctor during the Civil War, and he established his medical offices in Hollywood. And he actually was one of those, you know, who put a down payment to the Cossack house, let's put it this way. He's got means, and he supported the causes, not only for down payment for the Cossack house, but he did the down payment for the Veterans House as well in LA. So that's a kind of an interesting fact. So based on the studies, you know, what we did together with Mike, I think we think that it was about 200 probably Cossack families in Los Angeles. That's where we think we can settle this.
And the picture on the top is taken in Culver City. So those are, for the most part, those are Don Cossacks who came in and settled in Los Angeles. I would tell you that the
problem with the Cossacks in Los Angeles is that a lot of them who, went through Civil War, World War I, right? So they went serving to the army. So Civil War kicked in, they were evacuated. They left their families behind in Russia, for the most part. Not too many descendants left in Los Angeles. So sometimes when I write stuff and gets online, people from Russia write me back saying, oh, that's my grandfather. Oh, that's my great grandfather. So the descendants basically left in Russia for the most part, and so we kind of establishing connections that way through me writing something, through me publishing pictures or whatnot, and lots of them went through Yugoslavia, Bulgaria. They remarried and brought their second, third wives. I don't know, and they were in the late 30s, 40s, 50s, and not a lot of them had means and opportunities to have children, so it was a little difficult to scoop up the information about Cossacks for that reason.
Thank you, Ivan. Okay, there's Cossack newsletters and local news. Cossack Choir hosted many charity balls and many other events at the Cossack House. And the Cossack Ball took place in Park Manor, Western Avenue in LA. Mrs. Valentina yeah, you can take it from there, buddy.
So the Cossack Choir was formed in Los Angeles also. So they performed at every event possible. So not only at the churches, but invalid balls, which were taking place in Los Angeles every 2 years. The Ataman's wife, Miss Balaknina, she graduated 2 conservatories in Russia and ended up in Los Angeles. She became a very famous piano teacher in Los Angeles. Cossacks hosted their balls, but there were few of them in LA, not that often. Next slide, Mike.
Sure.
So they had newsletters in LA too, so they were, that's a way means connecting to each other. They published, see there's number one, they went up to late 80s, so there's 60 newsletters which were published in Los Angeles at that time. Next slide. Not only in Los Angeles, but the Cossacks had a bunch of publications across the United States and Canada. Terek, the Cossack, the Canadian stanitsa was actually the longest living stanitsa, and they were most active now up till 2000s, I would say. I don't know what's happening there right now. So a few landmarks in California, in Los Angeles. As you see, there's a St. Andrew's Church, which was built in Glendora by Cossacks. And we have pictures actually of inaugurating the church. It's still there. And then the streets, which is basically in Glendora, named after present Cossacks being present. There's a St. Vladimir in a Cossack place out there. So, those few landmarks left still in Glendora. And there's a cross which is standing behind the church. It's a memorial cross dedicated to Lians, and everybody knows what's happened in Lians, right? So Cossacks were sent back to Soviet Union, even not being Soviet citizens. They were brutally deported back by British forces. So there's a memorial cross standing right behind the church there, dedicated to that. For a few notable Cossacks in Los Angeles, on the right is Olga Svirupskaya. She is, everybody probably knows Kulibin, right? So the inventor, the famous Russian inventor. So she's
Ivan, I'm so sorry. Can you please go there? Because I cannot move camera from...
Yeah. So Olga Svir, she ended up being in Los Angeles. She was married to Ataman of the Stanitsa in Los Angeles, Boris Svir. They shortened their names from Svirupsky to Svir. She was a member, when the ladies who served in the Red Cross during World War I, they formed a society, Russian Red Cross Society in Los Angeles. So she was active member of Russian Red Cross in Los Angeles. She published books. She was a member of Russian Imperial Union Order, and so on. Next to her is General Kornilov. So he is a Siberian Cossack, graduated Omsk Cadet Corps, and he was the founder of the Cadet Society in Los Angeles. Next slide. So at the top, Professor Ulitin, he's the founder of the Glendora Stanitsa, actually. He was a professor in Pomona University, taught Slavic studies, and there's stipend named after him at Pomona University, still a grant given to students who wanted to continue study in Russia, and the grant gives them an opportunity to pay their fare to Russia and back, so to say. He did a lot of research. He was one of the most active members, not only Cossack Stanica, but the Cadet Union as well, because he graduated from the cadet school in Yugoslavia. And there's a Dr. Arera Buchin, whom I talked earlier about. So he came into Hollywood very too early. He's an Orenburg Cossack. He was a physician, a doctor, and he did put in a lot of provided a lot of financial supports to both Veteran Society, as I said, and Cossack Society, put the down payments to buy the houses. So here we have Eugene Kulakov, and we were at the Scouts house yesterday. So he's half of the family lived in Los Angeles, and the other half lived here in San Francisco. So he served. He died in 1967 in Los Angeles, and he served at the most vicious, fearless division, Cossack division called Wild Division, right? So where they were serving under Grand Duke Michael Alexandrovich, the brother of the Tsar, and they were the most bravest among all the Cossacks you can think of. So this is General Skvortsov also. He ended up in Los Angeles as well. He was in the Convoy. Mike showed the pictures of him earlier. His son was an active member of the Cadet Society. He lived in Los Angeles and then Sacramento. Next slide. So as up on top picture of Father Nicholas Boldarev. So because we did the presentation at the Russian Church and Russian Holy Virgin Mary Cathedral, so he was one of the priests of the cathedral. So he told me stories. He's like, Ivan, you know what? I had two grandfathers. I'm like, how is it possible? He goes, well, that's how it's possible. So his grandfather went and served in World War I and then Civil War, been shipped outside, and many years later, his grandmother sits in a subway in Paris and rides the train, and in front of her, she recognizes that's her husband. When she thought that he was killed long time ago, obviously remarried, and random train ride puts those souls back together. So and since then, he goes, I had two grandfathers, and he served at the cathedral for many years. And you see there's his biography out, his father's biography out there. So his father was a member of Donskoy Military Cadet Corps. He was a child. They were taken out of Russia, sent to Egypt, and ended up being in Yugoslavia. So big family. His brother was in the Zharov choir, a soloist of the Zharov choir. He just passed away. Father Nikolai lives in Canada right now, so he retired from priesthood and went back to Canada. And this picture has his grandfather out here down below. So we kind of put together the list of resting places where the Cossacks who ended up in Los Angeles. So we tried to collect as much as we can. Not every gravesite, I have to say that you see some of the gravesites, you can see that they were Cossacks, right? So like on top it says TKV, so Terskoy Казачье войско. There's a lot of gravesites which don't have that indication, so we can't really say, but because we studied, we added more names, we know that they were Cossacks. So, I don't know, about 70 people out here, and I don't know, as much at the Hollywood forever. So, the convoy people, those who served in Imperial Convoy, their gravesites in Hollywood, they have their pins right there. So original pins in their gravesites, and the gravestones look alike. So they all kind of buried with the same type of gravestones. Unfortunately, lately, what I've noticed, you go to the cemetery, it gets vandalized. Somebody's scrubbing the pins out of their grave. I don't know. So, but a few times I went back to the cemetery, I've noticed a few pins were missing. Somebody's tried pin them out. So we put the list, this is Hollywood forever. So two main cemeteries in Los Angeles where the Cossacks found their resting places are Serbian Cemetery and Hollywood Forever Cemetery.
And some of them we probably don't know because they're not marked. Like my father's does not work with KKV or anything else.
Right.
It's all in English, so
Right.
you wouldn't know it. And
Yeah.
Savitsky's the same way.
Right.
It's all in English, so you wouldn't even know unless you knew who he was. Yep, that's fine.
And the Muslims, right? So as we said earlier, right at the beginning of the presentation, so there were Buddhists, there were Orthodox, there were Muslims, right? They all served with Cossacks, troops and units. So there's a portion of Muslims, so to say Cossacks, who were involved with Terek, for the most part, Cossacks, because they came from mountain regions of Russia. So they are buried in Westminster Memorial Cemetery. The reason why they're buried there, because there's a big mosque by that cemetery. And you see there's Mistulovs out there, Bisikov, and there's more, but this is just to show that, you know, the Cossacks were not only Orthodox. So we give you a sample of their gravestones as well.
And there it is. So this is a photograph taken probably 20 years ago. I guess 20, maybe more. Here a picture I am. This is at the Kuban Cossack Museum in New Jersey. They have a beautiful collection of uniforms, regalia, you know, epaulets, pins, everything. And gentleman over here, I know pretty well, his name is John Ramakis, right here. And his son, he's already gone to college. He's graduated from college, so that's how long ago it was taken. And they have this big statue of Yermak behind it, which is a great way to take a picture of it. So I was there, and they had some celebration, and while I was there, you know, we had pictures taken, and we went around and everything else. If anybody ever wants to look it up, it's called the Kuban Cossack Museum in Howell, New Jersey. You'd have to get an appointment to go in there because it's not open all the time. It's kind of only open during festivals, or somebody would call up and go from there. Do you want me to show that video of the Cossacks riding, that last video?
I think it's a fun video, actually.
Okay, all right, let me cue that up. Hang on that second. Let's cue up the video.
So while Michael doing that, so the interest, my personal interest in the Cossacks ended up being because my roots are from Orenburg, and I have some Orenburg Cossacks in my family too. I mean, I'm not associating myself with Orenburg Cossacks at this point, but my great-grandfather was one of the Orenburg Cossack.
So we're going to show you a video that put a soundtrack. You won't hear it much because the speakers, and this was taken in General Shkuro's troop, 1925 in Dublin, Ireland. So you kind of get an idea of what their show was like and the amount of people they have. And there's not, the volume isn't up, but it's going to be, there is a soundtrack, but without speakers it isn't. You know, on that, there it is. So here comes Gamali, and my dad is second from the right there, because I can recognize him anytime. I'll get rid of that bottom one.
What is that, 1925?
Right there, there's Lavrov, which was in the convoy. That's him.
Ended up in Jordan.
Right, and he's part of this troop. So like one of the photographs, he's on top of the pyramid there. Jumping to the fire. So I just put this ending on it. I do have that website, Cossacks.com, and I haven't put it up yet. And that's kind of a snippet of what a show looks like. I mean, you can talk about it and see pictures, but that's what the show looked like back then.
When we did the presentation in Los Angeles, right? So we had members of the Hollywood Historical Society coming in, and they gave us homework. So they have the biggest archives. You know, studios never hold on to anything. So there's one gentleman in Hollywood who is like a Hollywood encyclopedia. So he comes to our presentations all the time. His name is Mark Wanamaker. He's got the biggest Hollywood archives in his possession. So his parents started collecting that. So he showed up with a bunch of pictures and printouts, and he gave us homework. So there's a Cossack right here. He came in before Michael's father to Hollywood. So he was in early 1920s, I think. And he was not an A-list actor, let's put it this way, B-list actor, but he was in hundreds of Western movies. And now we have to try to find out who he really was. His American name was Drew Barrymore, but then his Russian name was Ilya Boluk, and then there's another name which is something Boris. So it's a mystery. But we're gonna try to solve that mystery because that's what the Hollywood Historical Society brought on to us.
Very good.
So the end of the search for the Cossacks in Hollywood is not over. Michael, thank you very much for the amazing presentation.
I just want to add to it that my father was evacuated from the Crimea in 1920 with Wrangel's army, and I just think Ivan sent me a link to this. There is a book that was published, different album, but at least the album with my father's name and the ship. And he said, "Oh, I found your father." And he said, "Different ship." I said, "No, he was on the gunboat Ural." So he looked through again. He goes, "You're absolutely right." Had his name, his rank. So new stuff is even coming up from Russia that you can find that you wouldn't find. Also, he was stationed at Salimi Barracks in Constantinople. And with that, his friend from Russia sent me a list with his name and the date he left the barracks. Now I said, "Is it a military?" He said, "It's kind of unclear who was actually stationed there. It wasn't just a military barracks. I think it was mixed in with different people and everything else." So there's always something new happening. It'll happen all the time if you keep looking at it and trying to find information. Do you want to? Is there any questions that anybody has, or have I burned everybody out? No questions? Wow! Thank you.
As usual, we will get a chance to ask questions a little bit later, please. I will ask guys to help with remove all the chairs, right? And we'll have something, tea and...
I have one question for you.
Sure.
Ivan, you might be able to answer, Mike. The Zimov, was he related, since he was so involved in the Hollywood stuff, and I know we even have a couple of examples of things that the Zimov donated to the museum here. Can you tell me, was he a Cossack, or was he related to the Cossacks in any way?
Yes.
Thank you.
His mother was a Cossack, and his grandfather on his maternity side was a Cossack. He was a general. So my school, they were last name. So they were
Kuban Cossacks, right?
Also Kuban, right?
Yes. So on his father's side, General Nazimov, I mean Russian, but on his maternity side, Cossacks, yes. That is right. But our Nazimov is not related to Nazimova in Hollywood. So it's...
At the Family.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Yes. Yes. Yes.
It's recording, right? No, just you're just searching for information on the Cossacks in Hollywood. Is that
Because we can't spread out.
right? No,
We
just
wanna narrow it
wondering.
down, yes.
Okay,
Right, because-
can I add this to this too, and maybe it'll kind of spread it out. People came with our father's troop, the Protzenko Melikhoff troop. I met because he had a thing posted, and he is living in, his name is Alexander Anakushin, and he is living in Santa Barbara. He posted something about the troop, and I'm saying, this sounds familiar. I got a hold of him. Well, come to find out, his father was part of the troop, and in Ohio, 12 or 15 of these guys left the troop because there was a financial problem or whatever. So they lost the troop even before they got there. So we do know of people by that way outside the troop. So my father's troop, it's hard to trace down. I mean, I don't even know where his partner went. Most of them, I don't think, stayed in Los Angeles. I don't know. We don't know without him. So, yeah, it's Hollywood's probably the easiest way to track people down, I would think, because of, in the movies or whatever else. But, yeah, I mean, in the United States, there are people that are Cossacks that, they're connected and stuff like that.
Well, my grandfather was in L.A., but
Okay.
he just wasn't involved in films.
Okay.
What was his-
But they were involved.
What's his last name?
Velichko.
Oh, yeah. Yes, of course.
And by the way,
I think some of the Velichkos listed in the Serbian cemetery, yes.
yeah,
Yes.
he's there, and
Yes.
my father is in the one here, and we
Right.
kind of recently lost him. And there's the type of obelisk where all the names are listed because, as you say, sometimes you can't tell. So they have all the cadets
Right.
there.
I knew you. I think I knew your father, yes. I met him.
Yes. He kept everything. So I talked to Margarita a lot. The uniform my grandfather had, the suitcases with which they traveled.
The family ended up in Los Angeles and then relocated to San Francisco.
Yes, my father, yes.
Out there, yeah.
Yes, they stayed in L.A. But I have a lot of photos, a lot of stuff.
From LA time?
From LA time that he went to Yugoslavia, to Bor, and we have the old uniform. My brother inherited all the Cossacks things, the uniform and the weapons and the dagger, that kind of thing. Yes, and but there are letters, photographs, and I can't believe it. My dad kept everything, and my grandfather.
So did my father.
Yeah, so it's taken me 2 years to go through a lot of yeah, and now I'm in talks with Margarita. I think there's already a couple of things here.
And he left the memoirs too, I think
Yep.
I've read some of
Yep.
his memoirs, so that helps a lot in research.
Yes,
When it gets
yes.
down to,
I have some little books
Yeah.
here that I'm going to give you.
If you have any pictures from Los Angeles, there are digital copies,
Yes,
would be
many.
helpful.
I just haven't had the heart to go through them, but there are many boxes, because that was my dad's hobby, photography too.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Wow.
Thank you.
Great.
I'll
What
get them.
Cossack
Thank you.
was he?
My grandfather was a Cuban Cossack,
Okay.
yeah. And my father was a cadet in Yugoslavia.
Yeah. I know the last name, right.
You do
And I
that.
always wanted to put the dots together, how they get related, but I thought so that they are, yeah.
Great. That's it. All right. Thank you very much.